Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Martha Hughes. I'm the Adults and Education Manager with United Way of North Central New Mexico. And today we're going to be talking about caring, burnout, and mental health, and specifically how it relates to our roles as advisors, counselors, educators, staff members of direct services, kind of the broad spectrum when you're working really closely with students and clients. So first, we're going to get into caring. And I thought it would be really great to point out that of the core values of the National Academic Advising Association, caring is that first core value. So really looking at academic advisors and how they respond to and are accessible to others in ways that challenge, support, nurture, and teach. And that they also build relationships through empathetic listening and compassion for students, colleagues, and others. So really knowing that for many advisors, counselors, folks working in education and direct services, one of the foundational pieces of motivation that guides folks' passion is that they express care for others, and that really has driven them to be in these careers that they want to help others. And so these caring behaviors, when we express caring towards our students and clients, it can really be tied to how students see themselves, whether they feel engaged, whether they're motivated, whether they show persistence, and then even completion along academic goals. So there's quite a bit of literature out there around the importance of caring for students and clients. I also wanted to point out there's some really good resources out there around Kristen Swanson's theory of caring. And she writes specifically around advising and teaching nursing students, but I felt like a lot of it would also apply to when working with students and clients. So she has 5 caring processes. Knowing, so making sure we communicate clearly, listen, we're avoiding jumping to conclusions, making assumptions. We're also very focused on the present, so being there with our student or client, and that being emotionally present, physically present, intellectually present. Then doing for, attending to their needs while also preserving both your dignity and the student and client's dignity. And, are we able to show up for this other person as well as ourselves? Enabling. So I thought this was an interesting term because typically we think of enabling as being fairly negative. But in this case, it's talking about facilitating growth and transition. So I think even when working with clients and students, thinking about how can we help be that underlying support for folks and allowing them to learn and grow especially in their sense of independence and responsibility. So kind of enabling those pieces to function for a student so that they then are off and running on their own. And then maintaining belief. So having faith in others' capacity to be successful. So coming in with that positivity around, I'm meeting them where they're at. Let's see if we can help each other get to where they need to be going. And knowing that there are paths to success for our students and clients. And next to caring for ourselves. So in order to care for others, really we need to have that underlying care for ourselves. I liked this graphic here. I know that a lot of people might get that sense of anxiety if their phone battery or other device battery starts to get into the red. And they're like, oh no, what am I going to do to function without it? And that really we should view ourselves in that capacity as well, as to see, recognizing when are we in the red, when are we at capacity where we might not be able to take care of ourselves as well as express that care for other people. And so really to reflect kindness and loving towards ourselves. So thinking about having grace, forgiveness, compassion, mercy, equanimity, and dignity. And so that ties into, I know we hear a lot about self-care, and a lot of times that can seem fairly superficial, but when we get down to self-care, we really think about what does it mean to take care of ourselves holistically? Are we getting enough rest and movement? Have we spent some time outdoors? Do we have positive social connections? Are we trying to practice gratitude and have healthy eating patterns? It doesn't mean, that we'll always be perfect in all of those, but it just is kind of recognizing that our minds and bodies are tied together, and needing to take care of ourselves to function at our best, and in turn then interact and support our students and clients in the best way that we can. So then that kind of goes into burnout. If we have let some of those self-care practices go, if we are feeling extremely stressed at work, what does it mean to be burnt out? We talk about this term a lot. It gets thrown around, but just in its essence, it means physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion. And that can lead to decreased motivation, lowered performance, negative attitudes towards yourself as well as others. And so those are some signs to really watch out for within, your personal as well as professional life. And thinking about that same kind of concept of my battery, is my battery going towards the red? And what are some ways that I can be aware of that? Because first we have to have that self-awareness to recognize it. And then hopefully be able to recharge so that it doesn't, totally deplete our batteries. And so oftentimes that can be caused by excessive and prolonged stress. Sometimes it seems like we don't have very much control over our schedules or the amount of work that we have to do. And so trying to figure out how can we have that balance and have that self-awareness to say no to extra projects or create limits, find those little spaces of time that we can practice self-care for us so that we don't get to that extreme burnout stage. And I think one of the reasons it's really important for this community is that professionals who work directly with other folks, whether they be students or clients in the community, other staff members, they have increased emotional labor. You're focusing not only on your own emotional well-being and response, but you're also then responding in turn to someone else who might be stressed and worried, dealing with lots of complex topics. And so as you're helping them, it can be a lot of emotional labor to help them through their things, as well as focus on yourself. I wanted to show some statistics related to then, those professions. And this study is from 2022. So very recently, and professionals were asked, whether they experience feelings of burnout, and what, this percentage is for those who responded always or very often. And so K through 12 educators are at the very top. 44% of those educators feel always or very often burnt out, which is really sad. And the article linked here also expressed that the gap has been widening over the last couple of years between educators and other professionals. So that's something that we're really going to have to think of. And again, these kind of presentations, often it seems like it puts the onus on the individual. And so I think perhaps when we're finished and move into the discussion portion, talking too about like the systemic, how can we better support these particular industries and not just leave it on to individuals. Obviously, if this many folks are feeling burnt out, there is something within the system that needs to be addressed and changed. Right underneath K through 12 is then college or university, which is a lot of folks in this particular group. And then going into professional services. I wasn't sure exactly, they didn't give a breakdown of what they meant specifically by professional services. I was really surprised. You look lower on the list and you see community social services. I would have expected that to be a little bit higher on the list. So again, I'm not sure exactly how they are defining those, but just some things to think about. So then, once we were recognizing burnout, having some of that awareness around it, how can we help address it? And this is actually a framework from NACADA, which is the National Association for Academic Advising. So they had a lot of great articles on their website. And so this is the BRIGHT framework. So first, thinking of boundaries. So where do we set our own boundaries of when and how students or clients can reach us, or what are their expectations, responsibilities? How are we setting up that initial relationship and continuing on with it, so that we know, okay, I'm not going to be burnt out because I'm setting some limitations there. And that could also go with coworkers or other folks, is how do you want to create those boundaries that leave you feeling best and having time and energy to meet people where they're at. Then moving on to reframing. So this is a concept out of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it takes a lot of time and practice. But in essence, it's thinking about when we're having kind of negative thought patterns, kind of feeling like there's no progress being made, or making assumptions about other people and our relationships, being able to name that specifically and then shift our mindset to envision alternate perspectives. It's not necessarily to say that, oh, just think positive, but rather, why might this person have talked to me in this way? Or why might I have had the reaction I did? Are there other perspectives that I can bring into play that helps shift my thinking from just kind of the automatic assumption that's so often negative? The next is intuition. So really trusting yourself and saying no to things. I know sometimes that can be difficult, but again, kind of ties into boundaries of thinking, does this particular request or opportunity fit into my priorities, my beliefs? Is it going to work towards my goals or adding to my resume? So thinking intentionally about what feels good and what you want to move forward with. I don't know if anybody else out there is a people pleaser, but I know that can really guide sometimes what we feel compelled to do, and then can lead to a sense of resentment if we're not feeling, that same return on investment. So thinking about our own sense of what we should move forward with. And then goal setting. So really focusing on short-term and long-term goals that contribute to a larger picture. So for a sense of fulfillment. So if you are having a really tough day, had a tough interaction, thinking about, okay, here are the things that I want to accomplish. I've made progress already towards those things. I can see where I would like to continue to make progress. And that will give me the overall sense of, okay, the work that I'm doing does make a difference. And I am, striving for bigger goals and working towards them in a way that makes me feel good and helps me get past those moments in between that are difficult. Also that we can't do this alone. I see this as fitting into the systemic view around these topics. Again, reaching out to colleagues, talking to supervisors about workloads. We may not be able to change, workloads immediately or those busy times of year. But again, how can we be a voice for a better balance, not only for ourselves, but for others? How can we support others and have them support us? And then have some of those more systems level conversations about larger issues that might need to change. And then thinking about time management, that if we feel we've scheduled out our day in a way that accommodates, time for meetings, emails, time with coworkers, time with students or clients, ways that we are getting done what we plan to do without being overburdened by everything, as well as maybe finding those times where maybe I spent too long on emails and next time I'll have to schedule that in a little bit differently. It can really have a positive influence on our sense of satisfaction in our job and feeling like we are making progress onto those goals that we've previously mentioned. I know that that one can be very difficult, especially when we have multiple interruptions during the day. So thinking also of systems of, how to balance out possible interruptions and carve out that time that you need for specific tasks and projects. And then just again, having a reminder, as I mentioned, we have a video recording of the presentation from last December from our friend Trey Holland over at UNM's Shack Center. And so he really laid out a good basis for mental health and wellness. So I will send that out with resources. But just a quick reminder that, mental health isn't just, the absence of a mental illness. It really is about our emotional, psychological, and social well-being, which all play into how we make decisions, how we build relationships and interact with others, how we recognize our own abilities and learn and work well. So all of these things, relate to not only ourselves, but then also how we're relating to students and clients, how they're living their life. So again, it's always a practice that will benefit, both those that we work with as well as ourselves. And this particular definition was taken from the World Health Organization. And just like they point out that it's a fundamental human right. We don't often think about the focus on mental health and how important it is, and that everyone has a right to mental health. So that can be a good grounder, like if you're ever feeling guilty about needing to take time for yourself and focusing on that well-being and self-care. It's like, yeah, we all have that right to be healthy and well in all aspects of our life. So I wanted to share some different resources and just started out with all of our local institutions in the North Central area. One of the really great ones is one of the first call centers is the Agora Crisis Center. They've been around for a very long time, and they are a helpline as well as they offer trainings. And I'm hoping that sometime in the future we can actually get them into a session to go more in depth into a topic for us. Then, of course, the UNM Student Health and Counseling Center, or the SHAC, as we've referenced, Wellness at CNM. That's a program or department that's just been around for a year. So it's really great to see CNM having a multitude of resources for their students. It's really comprehensive. They're looking holistically at the students, connected also to their food bank. And then First Nations Community Health Source. They have specific resources around behavioral health and specific to like culturally informed behavioral health counseling and practices. We also have Santa Fe Community Colleges Counseling Center, and the Institute of American Indian Arts has counseling services, as well as a comprehensive list of resources on Southwestern Indian Polytechnical Institute's website as well. So those are all great places to tap into, especially if you're from one of those centers. But they're also very community driven. If you call up or send an email, say you're not from that particular institution, they're very generous with their time and energy to help you find those resources that fit your particular needs in the community, or if you're working with a student or client who needs something in particular.